Hello everybody and welcome to another reading session with Daisy Learns. So today is the 22nd of March 2022. It's a Tuesday, so hope you're all doing all good, all well, and keeping safe and healthy. So without wasting any of our time, let's start. So it's called Mrs. Dippy and Her Amazing Inventions by Tony Mitton. So we'll probably work on Mrs. Dippy's dog, the first book, mini book, or some might say chapters. So here you go. I think they are a group of stories compiled into one book. So let's start with Mrs. Dippy's dog. Mrs. Dippy was in her workshop. There was a knock on the door. It was PC Best, the local policeman. "Hello, Mrs. Dippy," he said. "I've come to warn you. There is a gang of thieves about, so keep your doors and windows locked. And don't leave anything lying around. Have you got a burglar alarm?" "Not yet," said Mrs. Dippy. "But I soon will have." "Leave it to me." Mrs. Dippy went to her storeroom to look for useful bits. Her storeroom was full of old machines that had broken down and were no use to anyone else anymore. But Mrs. Dippy was a clever woman. She could make amazing things with bits and bobs. Before long, she had got together an interesting little pile of this and that. She put the bits in a cart and pulled the cart into her workshop. Mrs. Dippy laid out the bits neatly on the floor. She looked at them thoughtfully. There was an old dustbin without a lid. There were lots of empty tin cans. There were bits of old Hoover tube, pieces of pipe, electric wire from lamps and broken bicycle lights. There were even parts from radios. It looked a mess and a muddle, but slowly, carefully, Mrs. Dippy began to put them together. As she worked, she talked quietly to herself. By the next day, her work was nearly done. Mrs. Dippy stood back and gave it a long, hard look. Yes, not bad. It did look just about right. And what did it look like? Why, a dog, of course. So here's the pepper pot nose. Here's the headphone ears, tail with plug, dustbin body, Hoover tube legs, castor feet, and baked bean tin head. Quite clever. It had a dustbin body, 4 legs on castors, a doggy head with a pepper pot for a nose, and a not very waggly tail. That was because there was a plug on the end of it. The plug was for charging up its battery. For this was no ordinary dog. It was a robot dog. Mrs. Dippy liked the look of her electric dog. He seemed like a very good robot dog indeed. "But you do look a bit dented, don't you?" she murmured. "Of course. That's what I'll call you. I named this dog Dent," she said, cracking open a can of Diet Pepsi. "You'll be better than an alarm, won't you?" she said. "You'll keep those thieves away. But first I'll need to turn you into a real guard dog. To begin with, you'll need a loud bark." Mrs. Dippy opened a little door in Dent's head. There were wires inside. She got to work with the wires, and soon it was done. "Let's hear it," said Mrs. Dippy, standing back. Buzz, whizz, barked Dent. That will have to do for now, said Mrs. Dippy. Let's see to your eyes next. She put some bits of a bike light on Dent's eyes to make him look fierce. If you see a thief, these fierce eyes will flash red on and off. She told him, Now I need to tighten your nuts and bolts a bit, so keep still for a moment. Mrs. Dippy took out her big spanner from her pocket. When Dent saw the spanner, his eyes lit up. He thought the spanner was a big metal bone. So he grabbed it in his mouth and ran off into the garden. Come back here at once, shouted Mrs. Dippy. But Dent was too busy with the spanner to hear her. He was digging a hole to bury it in. Mrs. Dippy led Dent back inside. I think you need a bit more fixing, she said crossly. She looked at Dent's wires and did some more work. Then she stood back. There, she said proudly. But Dent wagged his head instead of his tail. Then he began to walk backwards. Said Mrs. Dippy. You need more practice. Come on. Time for walkies. Mrs. Dippy and Dent set out for the park. On the way, Dent kept turning round in circles. Every time he passed a lamp post, he tried to bite it. Mrs. Dippy frowned as she pulled him along. When they got to the park, Mrs. Dippy let him off the lead. Dent ran straight to the pond. He jumped in with a splash and began to chase the model boats. Buzz! Whizz! Buzz! Whizz! He barked with great excitement. He thought they were robot ducks. Come away, you silly dog. Come and fetch some sticks, called Mrs. Dippy. She began to throw sticks all over the place. Go and fetch. Boy, fetch. Dent, she shouted. Dent ran off. When he came back, his mouth was full of umbrellas. A lot of angry people were chasing him. Just then a motor mower went by. It was mowing the grass by the pond. Dent stopped. He dropped the umbrellas and growled. He thought the mower was another robot dog like him. Grrr, he growled. Brrr. The motor mower seemed to say back. Dent ran at it with his red eyes flashing on and off. Bang! He crashed into it, and pieces went flying everywhere. It took Mrs. Dippy and the gardener a long time to sort out all the pieces, but in the end they had two neat piles, one for Dent, the other for the mower. Mrs. Dippy borrowed the gardener's wheelbarrow to take Dent's bits back home. When she got there, she took out her plans and got down to work. This time, I'll be much more careful, she said. Here goes. Mrs. Dippy got very busy in her workshop. I think this goes here, she said. And I think this goes here too. But I'm not sure where this goes. Let me see how. And let me see now. She was so busy that she did not notice the thief creeping into her garden. He was just about to steal some of her best apples from her prize apple tree. There, said Mrs. Dippy, sounding pleased with herself. I think that's right. Let's try you out in the garden. Come on, Dent. She opened the door, and Dent ran out at once, almost knocking her over. His eyes were flashing. The thief took one look at him and jumped straight up into a tree. He clung up in the branches for dear life, but Dent had not seen the thief, nor had Mrs. Dippy. For Dent was running up and down the garden, nibbling away furiously at the grass. He seemed to think he was a lawn mower. The thief crawled along the branch and quickly jumped over the garden wall. It's time to move on, mates, said the terrified thief to his gang. There's an iron dog on our trail. It's got red eyes and terrible teeth. It runs around growling and chewing up everything in its way. It nearly chewed me up too. I'm not staying around here to be crunched up by a mad metal dog. "Yeah," said the boss. "Let's get out of here." "Back to work again, I think, Dent," said Mrs. Dippy. "You seem to have some bits of mower mixed up inside you. Never mind, we'll get you right in the end." And she started to hum again as she peered at her plans. Just at that moment, P.C. Best poked his head through her window. "It seems those thieves have gone," he said. "We found their hideout empty, and they were seen driving away very fast indeed." "That's nice," said Mrs. Dippy. "Now where does this wire go?" What happened when Dent saw the motor mower? And how did Dent stop the thief? Two lovely questions to end our story. And hopefully, maybe tomorrow or later, we'll continue with the second story, which is called Mrs. Dippy's Helper. There we go. So probably chapter 2, because it's still about the dog. We'll find out more next time, all right? So until then, we'll see you very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. And be safe. God bless everybody.